When putting together today's talk, I was a little bit caught off on how to actually present it because I wasn't really sure on what I should talk about since a lot of people attending probably have already read the book, and so I didn't want to just regurgitate old stories. And in case someone hadn't read the book, I didn't just want to spoil any of the life events of old Alan Moore. And in the end, I decided it could be interesting to instead talk about my research process and how I came up with the complete story of Alan's life. And so, without further ado, let's get into that. So, for me, uh, finding out about Alan Moore and about war artists in general began with the book Battle Lines by Scott Beavan. Now, Scott's book is fantastic, and it covered pretty much about the brief life story of about 30 or so Australian war artists from the Second World War up until present. And Alan Moore's life was told in chapter 2 of that book over about a 30-page span. Now, although Scott's book is a very good book, and I do recommend giving it a read, um, there's only so much you can tell in 30 pages, especially when the man lived 100 years. And on top of that, while Scott is a fantastic storyteller, he is ultimately a journalist rather than a historian, and he was there to tell a very good story rather than actual history. And a lot of this was evident when he would just more or less take Alan's word from interviews rather than what was in the period documentation and records. So becoming enamored with Alan's life through battle lines and then through my own additional research, I decided to go off the period documents and what I could find rather than just his own word through the interviews that he gave. Now, when I go ahead and I research someone, and this could, by the way, this can be used to research anyone up until about 1950. So if you have family or if you just want to research a service member's life and their records, you can use what I'm going to talk about today to research them. And it's very easy, very straightforward, and you'd be amazed at how much information is out there. So the first place we begin is at the Department of Veteran Affairs nominal roll. Now, this will cover all veterans who served overseas from World War II, Korea, and the Vietnam War. If you have someone that you want to research from the First World War or the Boer War, that information can be found on the Australian War Memorial website on their own nominal roll. In this case, however, Alan Moore, he is a Second World War veteran, so we come to the Department of Veteran Affairs. And it's very straightforward. You've got here, you can see the conflict, the service number, or the name details. Now, at first, I didn't know Alan Moore's service number. If you do know the service number of the person you want to research, much easier, just jot that in, done. However, in my case, I needed to do a bit more finessing with that. And so you just put in surname, Moore, first name, Alan. If you had a second name, which Alan didn't, you could add that in, and you'll be given a big list of everyone who served in that conflict with that name. Now, after a little bit more fine-tuning of the list, I was able to come up with these two records. And again, if you're looking for a family member, you can find a page just like this that'll give you their name details, when and where they were born, when and where they enlisted, when they left the armed services, and what unit they were posted with at the end. Now, already this is a lot of information which is very useful to us as historians and as researchers. It shouldn't be the be-all and end-all of your research. There are a lot of little things. Sometimes the dates are wrong, and also the unit at discharge or the posting at discharge is just that. It is the unit they were stationed in when they left the Army, Navy, or Air Force. It doesn't necessarily mean they were with that unit throughout the course of the conflict. And so that means we need to go a little bit deeper to get more detailed information. And that is where we would now take this, the service number. So we can now see we have his actual service number, in this case, VX93880. In Alan Moore's case, he was in both the Air Force and the Army due to becoming a war artist in late 1943. And so he would also have an Air Force service number. Depending which record you want to pull in the next step, it'll depend which service number you'll take. For the argument of this presentation, though, we're going to take that Army number. So now we go to the next and slightly more complicated stage of the research, and that is actually pulling the records we're going to use to start building this person's story, and that is the service records. So you'll go to the National Archives of Australia, and from there you can do what's called a record search. And all you do is simply you throw in the service number that you've just taken from the Department of Veteran Affairs, and you'll be given a nice big record here, big folder, and at the top you'll find View Digital Copy. Now I want to stress for anyone who might use this for themselves, these records will only take you up to the Second World War. Anything beyond that, unfortunately, is retained by the Department of Defense, and you will not have access to it. But if it's World War I veteran, or in this case World War II, you should be able to get all military service records, again, unless that person continued their service after the Second World War. So once you're here, we click View Digital Folder or Digital View, and we can actually go in and see the original period service record of that person. So from here, I can literally see everything Alan Moore did during the war, or at least the dot points of it. The first page is we're going to find out a lot of basic information, his address, his occupation at the time of enlistment, all his personal details, so height, eye color, complexion, next of kin, things like that. So this is extremely useful when we're trying to build a broader picture of the person that we're currently researching. If you keep going through, you'll find pages with enlistment papers. Sometimes you'll get lucky and there'll be a photo, a mugshot. Ultimately, though, we want to get to this next page, which is on the right here, and this is essentially everything that this individual did while they were in the military, and it'll tell you where they deployed, who they deployed with, what they were doing at the time. Did they go AWOL? Were they in hospital? What were they in hospital with? And so these pages, as long as you can read cursive, are extremely useful and honestly just incredible to read. Like, here is someone's entire war service just in front of you that you're able to read. So by now, as you can imagine, I already have a pretty good broad understanding of Alan Moore's life. I know everything he did in the Army. I know when he joined and when he left, and already that's a pretty good story. But it's not enough to make a book out of, and it's definitely not enough for what we want or what I want. And so we need to go deeper. So here are some more things, and these are more sources I pulled on to try and create his story. And the first I'm going to talk about is the Australian War Memorial. Many people, I hear it all the time, they think the Australian War Memorial is the pinnacle of military research. It can be, depending what you're trying to find. In the case of Alan Moore, he was very famous in his occupation, very famous as a war artist. And so there is an abundance of research available through the War Memorial on him. Photos, documents, even films, the paintings. If you're researching a family member or an average soldier, more than likely you're not going to find anything on the War Memorial relating to that person, unless they did something significant. They won a medal, the military cross, the DSO, some form of decoration. But otherwise, chances are the War Memorial isn't going to have a thin on them. However, in this case, Alan Moore is very well known, very famous, and so we actually have an abundance of resources to draw on. And the one that is most useful to me is the digital collections down the bottom there. So in the digital collections, and there's actually a few more that aren't listed here, these are massive folders that essentially have every little scrap of paper related to Alan Moore's war service in them. Every personal letter, newspaper articles, every order, list, documents, anything that related to either Alan Moore's war service or his later service with the Australian War Memorial in the 1970s. All of that is combined into these folders. Some of them I actually had to travel to the War Memorial to view as they hadn't yet been digitized. But this is really where we start getting the information, the story we need to be able to build a book. Because I can more or less see what Alan was doing, thinking, and creating on a day-by-day basis. As he was constantly writing reports to the War Memorial and to Colonel Trelaw, and all this is being told to us through these documents. And honestly, it is incredible to read through. If you're into history like me, even if you're not looking for something specific, I highly recommend jumping on and giving some of these a read because they do tell incredible stories of our country's history. So outside that, the main thing I used the War Memorial for in my case was finding photographs, viewing the paintings, and occasionally watching a video where Alan might appear. But for the most part, it was these documents that I really took advantage of. Moving on from that, we have Trove. Now, Trove, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated research resources in Australia. It is incredible. Trove is basically a combination of all the archives of Australian libraries and many museums around the whole country. And so you can see what libraries have what books, what libraries have what photos, documents, journals, everything, and a lot of it is digitized and available for you to view straight away. In my case, the most useful of these is the newspaper and gazettes. In terms of newspapers, pretty much every single newspaper ever published in Australia up until 1955 is going to be digitized and available on Trove. And beyond that, many that were published after 1955, though due to copyright laws, there are a lot that are missing, will also be there and be available. And those that aren't there, they can be relatively easily accessed through the Sydney Morning Herald archives, which are online. Though sometimes you need to pay for access to them. In my case, I was lucky, and through the Liverpool City Library, they had an account with the Sydney Morning Herald newspapers, and I was able to get access to all of those for free. So if you are interested in looking at more recent newspapers, I recommend approaching your local library. So once here, I can simply go into Trove, type Alan Moore, war artist, and boom, we get all these articles, hundreds of newspaper articles, talking about exhibitions, his war service, even comics making fun of him as the artist who won Troppo in New Guinea. And yeah, it's incredible because we start to pull together a more personal story rather than just official military documents. On top of this, we also are able to find births, deaths, and marriages announced in the newspapers, which is something a lot of people will find useful if they're researching any family member, really, even if it's not someone who's military related. And maybe not for Alan Moore, but often there's casualty reports or battle reports. A lot of local newspapers will write about their local boys going away to war. So if you are looking to research a family member, I highly recommend go on Trove, type in their name and maybe a few other keywords, see what you can find. It's a fantastic resource. And the last thing I will talk about is simply just Google. In 2026, you'd be amazed at how much is simply on the internet. Generally, it's not going to be stuff that's really more deep than the records you can go view elsewhere, but it can still be helpful. One thing in terms of Alan Moore, I would specify that you make sure that you want that you type in the Australian Alan Moore. Otherwise, you're going to get this guy who, as his title suggests, he's a wizard and a Rasputin impersonator. This, of course, or maybe not of course, as I didn't know who he was, is actually the famed comic book author Alan Moore from England. And I hate him. He's the bane of my existence. I'm sure he's a very talented artist in his own right, but God, I'm so sick of seeing his face when I'm trying to find out information on Australian Alan Moore. So do make sure you specify who you're looking for. And once you get that, you'll find a whole heap of stuff, whether it be, Alan Moore, Wikipedia, as for what it's worth, the War Memorial, and other things like, so you can see the Naval History Society. They talk a lot about his works with the Merchant Navy and on the Battle of Los Negros. So there can be quite a few significant and helpful links just for Google alone, including the most important links to my book and being available and sold online. So always good to see that. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. So that comes full circle. There are a few other little bits, interviewing family members and other historians to get information. But ultimately, this all combines into my book, Drawing Hell, which is still available. I don't know if it's still at Big W, but it's still available online and also in a number of bookstores. Now, why I have you, and before we get into any questions, if there are any, I do want to take a moment to sort of promote my next and upcoming project, though it's still most likely a couple of years off, and that is K-Force. For the last about year and a half, more or less since I finished Drawing Hell, I have been working on K-Force, the complete history of the Australian Army in Korea. This will be more or less a day-by-day accounting of the Australian Army's experiences in the Korean War, and will focus heavily on the small unit patrolling actions of that war. Whilst there are many books on the Korean War, most of them seem to heavily focus on just the first 1 year of that conflict, from September 28th, 1950 to October 5th, 1951, with the Battle of Marion San. Beyond that, even though the war went on for another 2 years, more or less, and 40% of the casualties took place after that point, almost no one ever talks about those in their books. And so I'm there bringing all that research together and hopefully have a well-compiled historic account of the Australian forces in Korea. So more on that to come at a much later date. Like I said, we're about a third of the way through first draft, but that is the next project and it is coming eventually. Beyond that, though, if anyone does have any questions, if not, that's fine, but I am more than happy and will try my best to answer those. I'll just open the chat on my phone. If anyone wants to either type or talk, please feel welcome. Okay. Otherwise, if there is no questions, that's completely fine too. And I would be very happy to thank everyone who did come for attending. It's been great, even though it's been short, to be able to talk to everyone and sort of share my own research processes.
John, you need to remind people they're muted and you have 2 people with their hands up.
Oh, okay. What Mum just said, I do apologize. Everyone was muted for the duration of the talk. I also can't really see the teams because of the PowerPoint. So if you do have a question, please go into the chat and type it.
If you close, John, close your PowerPoint. Yep. Go to the share button and unshare.
Okay. Bear with me. Stop sharing. There we are.
Now you should see.
Okay. My apologies. I'm not used to Teams.
Okay. So John, Tony has a question.
Yep. Bear with me. I might need your help here, Mum. I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. So Tony's unmuted. He can ask his question now.
Hello, Tony.
Hi, John. Hopefully you can hear me okay over here. Not so much a question because you've answered the question I was going to ask, and it's what's next, and really looking forward to it. I made my way through the book over the Christmas holidays, got about a third of the way through, so no spoilers. I'm going to endeavour to the end. But more than anything else, I just actually want to offer you congratulations on your first publication. It's a terrific thing to see. I think your research was excellent. The depth of your research clearly came across in the publication itself. So that's absolutely wonderful. What drew you to Alan Moore? Was it his artworks first, or was it part of the story, or was it a combination? And I'll stop talking now.
No, well, first, thank you very much for the praise. I'm happy you're enjoying the book, and yeah, hopefully the next book I work on will be even bigger and better than Drawing Hell. Um, as for why Alan Moore, it's a bit strange. His life was so incredible, and so much stuff happened. It's almost like reading through a movie script, and yet no one had really ever talked about it beyond what occurred at Bergen-Belsen, which I won't go into because I'm sure you'll get up to that in the book itself. And many people, like, he was only at Bergen-Belsen for 3 days, and yet people act like that is the entirety of his legacy. And I just didn't think that seemed right. And I thought someone has to tell this story. Why not me? And so I started researching more. And ultimately, the more I researched, the more I just fell in love with the story I was finding. And it just grew from there.
John, David's got a question.
Yep. Sorry there, David. We haven't got sound coming through. One sec. I'm not sure if the mic's picking up.
They're just trying to fix it, John. Just give them a moment.
All good. I'll answer while we're waiting. I can quickly jump over to Aim just had a question in the chat, which was, how were you able to come into contact with personal family members of Moore to aid in the research of Drawing Hell? That was actually quite difficult, mainly because Alan Moore himself didn't have any children. He did have one stepdaughter who, honestly, I attempted to make contact with several times, and it just never worked out. I did have a lot of help from his niece, Peter Digby, who was fantastic, and I kind of found her, as morbid as it is, through Alan Moore's obituary. She had left a comment and her contact in the obituary, and I was able to reach out to her through that, and she was more than happy to help me tell that story. Honestly, a lot of the time, it's just chance in finding them and hoping that they have some sort of putting themselves out there in the social sphere. Otherwise, really, yeah, you won't be able to find them. So I just got quite lucky with some of those connections. Yeah. Any luck, David?
No, they're going to type the question. Just give them a moment.
No worries at all.
So for people of the process to get published.
I'm sorry, Mum. What was that? You're breaking up a little bit.
Sure.
I'm sorry, that didn't come through for me. Can you say it one more time? Ah, right. Okay. Publishers. Oh God. So, um, finding a publisher honestly was probably the hardest part of this whole process. Once I had a more or less completed manuscript, which I had rewritten 3 or 4 times, um, it's a bit difficult unless you can get a literary agent to help you, which I ended up not being able to. In that regards, you can apply. There's multiple ways you can find them, either just through googling them. There's the Literary Society of New South Wales and of Australia. If you're willing to pay money to be a part of that, they can help you find literary agents. I was quite didn't have a lot of spare money at the time as I was saving up for my move to Japan, where I am at the moment. So I was just trying to find a more reasonable, cheaper option to go with. I did reach out to some, and I was rejected a few times. And same with publishers, a lot of them won't talk to you unless you've got a literary agent backing you. Those who did, they just said they weren't that interested. I ended up finding Big Sky Publisher through a friend of mine called David Howe, who'd written his own book on the Dakota campaign. And he told me, hey, they do a lot of military books. Here's the email of their military guy. Reach out to them, see what they can do. And so I did. I emailed them. I sent them the manuscript, and they got back to me and they said they were interested. They would publish, and the rest was history. They helped me through the editing process and finalizing and putting all the images together and finding distributors. And honestly, they've been fantastic to work with. And yeah, again, it really just comes down to either luck or money. Luck in finding someone like me, or money in being able to afford the literary agents. It's not insanely expensive if you do want to go that route and pay money for it. But like I said, just my circumstances at the time, I was trying to save every penny. I ended up just holding on to it and waiting. And was there someone, what your plans are when you come home? So I am due to finish my time. For those who may not know, I am currently in Japan on the JET program, the Japanese Exchange and Teaching Program. I am due to complete my contract on the 28th of July this year, and then I'll be coming back to Australia. Once I'm back, I would like to continue my work in museums, hopefully something military related, be it the Australian War Memorial, or if by some luck I got into the Australian Army History Unit, as Alan Moore was in. However, honestly, that we'll have to wait till it's a bit closer to see what positions are available, what jobs are out there, and I'll just do my best and see if I can get into the field again. Oh, good. Hopefully that answers it all. Okay. Any other questions out there? Oh, good. So, yeah, so who vetted the book before publication, and did the Australian War Memorial have any say in the release? So actually, the Australian War Memorial had pretty much next to nothing to do with the actual publication of my book, apart from using their archives, which are all public domain and available for free. I very rarely actually engaged with the War Memorial. Namely, there was actually another gentleman at the War Memorial who knew Alan Moore personally and had potential plans of writing his own book. I didn't want to potentially take his research. I wanted it to be my own research. So I kind of stayed away from that area. In terms of vetting the book and proofreading it, I did have Professor Peter Stanley, who I met in my time at the Liverpool Regional Museum, kindly offered to read the first 5 or 6 chapters of my book, and he provided mountains of feedback and corrections, which were fantastic and extremely useful Yeah, there we go. And yeah, so he was probably the biggest help in terms of fact checking a lot of things and giving me advice as an author. Also, Big Sky Publishing did put me on to an editor, who was fantastic, and she helped me fact check a few dates and a few names that had slipped my attention when I was writing. And yeah, beyond that, I'd say they were the two main people who helped me get everything together. Oh, God, an audio version of the book. Not at the moment. I haven't been approached by the publisher to do anything regarding um, an audio version, and I'd love to. I know that my mate Dave Howe, who wrote his book, he's currently getting an audiobook deal done. So there is hope. I guess it really depends how sales go, and I will be finding out in the next month or two how sales have been. Fingers crossed, it all goes well, and who knows what's in the future. Perhaps there will be an audiobook at some point, which I would love as someone who doesn't enjoy reading as much as I do writing. Okay. Fantastic. But also, thank you everyone for your support and actually, giving it a read and coming along today. It's really amazing seeing people actually care about the story I've been able to share with you guys. And yeah, even though it's definitely not my story, I'm merely just the radio transmitting it out to the world. So I am so happy that people enjoy hearing about Alan Moore as much as I did when I was first going through all this. So thank you. Are you 5 or 6 going to the War Memorial? Well, please tell them about Alan Moore. If you have kids going visiting the War Memorial, share Moore's story, because his paintings are scattered throughout the galleries, and they'll be able to see the paintings, and they will actually know who some of the stories that went into doing them. And if anyone ever had any questions after this, obviously, many of you know my mum, Sandy, or you can reach out to me, reach out to one of us directly. I'll be happy to talk to anyone or give any information on really anything. If you have family members you need help researching, please hit me up. I'm happy to help. What made you jump from the Second World War into the Korean War with the next upcoming publication? Very interesting. So it's a little bit strange that despite my first book being predominantly about the Second World War, it's never actually been a keen interest of mine, World War II. Don't get me wrong, I know way more about this conflict than the average person ever will, and to be honest, that I ever thought I should. But yeah, it was never a flame for me. More, it was the fact that war artists, I love art, I love war, and the combination of those things, and then just Alan's story being incredible is what got me into World War II interest. As for Korea, I remember it was about 2022, and it was the 70th anniversary of the Korean War, which, to be honest, at that point, I knew next to nothing about the Korean War. And I just randomly decided, hey, I want to go on a holiday to Korea and visit some of these battle sites because it's the anniversary. It could be fun. I better start, I'm going to do that. I better start actually researching the war that I'm going to go visit. And it kind of spiraled out of control. It's this incredible conflict that's kind of a combination of World War One, World War Two, and Vietnam all mushed together. Because of the small scale of the Australian involvement, there's so many more personal accounts, more human stories to be told. And it is such a significant part of modern global history that just people don't know about. I mean, it's called the Forgotten War for a reason. And all of that really, it attracts me, the nicheness of the conflict. And so I guess that's why I've got a passion for the Korean War, and why I want to, like Alan Moore being an untold story, I kind of want to tell another untold story, that being what our diggers did in Korea. So hope that answers that. What is your relationship with the military history, the military museum in South Korea? Um, I have a limited relationship with the United Nations Peace Memorial in South Korea, which is located in Busan, is an incredible museum just across the road from the United Nations War Grave Cemetery. Essentially, I approached them when I was there and offered to donate them an original Korean War slouch hat, as they didn't have one in their collection and I had two. They were more than happy to do that, to accept that. And since then, I've been back and forth a few times helping them with research. Fingers crossed in the future, I'll be able to cooperate with them more. Like I said, they're a fantastic museum and fantastic people for what they do with the cemetery. So if you're ever in South Korea or Busan, I strongly recommend going to that museum and giving them your support. So people's weird fixations is what brings stories to the rest of us, and a lot of books, they come from just some person who is weirdly obsessed with one little story that they want to share with everyone else. So I'm just lucky I was able to publish that. Yeah. Were there any Australian war artists unique to the Korean conflict you may explore in the future? I would assume a lot of them would be retreads from World War II. So the Australian war art scheme, which again is talked about in the book, it was started in World War One and is still going today. It is the longest running war art stream in the world. And of course, that means there were war artists in Korea. And a few of them were even actually for carryovers from World War II. The most notable of which is Ivor Healy, who was the first or second World War II official war artist in North Africa in 1941. And he served throughout the entire conflict of World War II and then was recommissioned in Korea to go over there and do a whole bunch more artworks on the Korean War. And his story in itself is absolutely incredible. I think he's got 2 books written about him, one by the Australian War Memorial. And again, all those are available on the Australian War Memorial website. If you go on there and just type in Ivor Healy, you'll get some incredible artworks. There were a few more war artists. I know he was mostly with the Army. There was a Navy war artist who, you're going to have to forgive me, I've forgotten his name, but he also did quite a few incredible works. Again, I said at the start of the presentation, Scott Baven's Battle Lines, if you have interest in war artists, even though it's not perfect, give it a read. It is an incredible book and it has many, many stories in it that you'll love. Is Drawing Hell available at the Australian War Memorial? I think so. It was available at the Australian War Memorial. It's still on their website. For obvious reasons, I haven't gone in person to see it. Fingers crossed it stays there. If you visit the War Memorial, you can take your own copy or buy a copy, and you can even try and find some of these paintings in the War Memorial, as many of them are on display for the public. How do I get a signed copy? When I'm back in Australia, I would be happy to sign anyone's copy. Just run into me or send me a copy. I'll be more than happy to sign it. I even changed my entire signature just so it looks more beautiful in a book. Fantastic. Okay. Any last minute questions before we wrap up? Yeah. Yeah, no worries. You're welcome. Just a sec. Hey, well, straw tours. um, uh, I would love to go to stalls and talk or even lead tours at museums, or eventually one day hopefully some battlefield tours. Um, One thing I would love to do, and this is in my future as well, is for those of you who know me, I have a huge collection of militaria, and I would love to one day be able to go to schools and set that up, and especially for my reproduction, to actually let kids try on uniforms and handle them, and be actually physical with our history. And same thing goes for museums and like the War Memorial. I would always be open in the future to giving tours at those places, though a lot of them do have their own tour guides. So it's in the future, and if any art classes want to learn about war artists, I'd be happy to talk to schools in the future about that as well. I don't have any plans at the moment, but I am open to it. Yeah, 100%. Like I said, it's something I'm going to look into when I'm back, and again, who knows what the future holds. Audrey, thank you for asking so many great questions. Okay. Well, we've been going for an hour now, and I believe in Australia it's after 7. So if you haven't had dinner already, a lot of you guys are probably quite hungry. So I'll let you all go, and I look forward to meeting you all when I get back in a few months. And again, thank you so much for taking the time today to come and listen to me jabber on for an hour. So thank you. Hey, all good. Well, you guys have a lovely night, and I will see you in a few months. Have a good evening.